All right, you are listening to the Plug Podcast, maybe watching the Plug Podcast. Music and more. I am Bushy. That is Metal Mike. Who is with us?
Well, we got our friend Travis Perotta here, man, as a special guest. Uh, we invited several people because originally we kind of wanted to do a roundtable type thing, but some people couldn't commute, some people weren't interested.
Yeah,
So it's just Travis, but that's fine, man. I mean, fuck, if we get too big of a roundtable, it might be like a 6 hour episode.
yes.
Nobody wants to hear or see that. So,
It make
how you doing, brother? Thank you for coming on, Travis.
Hey, I'm doing well, guys. Thanks for having me on.
yeah. Thanks for coming, first timer. That's great. Your career's over now, just so you know.
Okay, I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, man. I tell you, it's good to be back. I think the last episode we recorded was pre-Helene. So that was several weeks.
Yeah, why don't you go into that, Bushy? Kind of let everybody know what's been going on with you and yours and everything, you know.
Well, it's funny because I was at work the night before and I was making jokes. Like, these motherfuckers going to call in for rain, you know, because it's the South and, oh, a snowflake fell, so I'm not coming to work kind of thing, just straight up pussies. And I get up the next morning and I see there's no power. And I look at my phone and I got a message from my girl. She says, I'm scared. I'm so oblivious of what? And I set my phone down. I fell back asleep. I didn't get up till almost 1 o'clock that afternoon. I'm driving down the road and I noticed there's a 1.5 foot trench going down my road that I had to navigate to get to her house. And then I see there's a line down. I was like, oh. And as she comes out of her house, I said, hey, you okay? She said, yeah, I guess. I said, cool. I'm going to McDonald's to get coffee. She said, you are not getting out of here. So what are you talking about? She said, look to your right. Well, I looked to the right and I saw a river where I never see river. I was like, oh, okay. Went ahead and parked and I walked down our road and yeah, I'd have never gotten out of there because it was nothing but water and trees in the middle of the road. We spent 3 days behind that. I mean, we didn't get any damage to our homes, thankfully. But it took 3 days of everyone that lives on these, because it's dirt roads, it's not even paved roads. We're kind of working together, cutting down trees. Good old boys have bobcats, so they're pushing mud out of the way once the water receded. By that point, we were out of food. We had to haul ass to Tennessee, to her sister's house. Yeah, the little town I live in got pretty much decimated. Power is slowly coming back to most of us. That's where I am tonight. I'm not at Party Rock Central Studios. I'm at work because all of our residents were evacuated. And I am one of 4 people that is working currently. We have 4 managers, but 4 regular staff. We're kind of just running security on the building at night, making sure nobody comes in and steals anything until we get our people back, I guess. It's been fucking nuts. That much I know, but everybody I know and care about, I've had contact with. So I know they're all okay. I do know that we've lost some people in this area, but I know that we're okay.
Wow, man, yeah, I mean, it's scary shit. I mean, it's one of those things, though, I guess, like you said, depending upon where you're from or where you've lived, you are absolutely right about the South. And one thing, man, when it comes to like snow, they freak out.
Oh yeah.
Rain, snow, which is really weird with the rain, though, because I'm sitting there thinking, but they have to deal with hurricanes, which is something I don't have to deal with living here in Southern Illinois. I mean,
Well,
tornadoes, yes.
yeah.
Tornadoes is a big worry here, obviously, shit like that. But yeah, and of course, winter storms too. Um, but then if you live in the West Coast, you got to worry about earthquakes.
Yeah.
And everybody has their thing, where if you live on the East Coast or down south, where hurricanes can be a real. I mean, hurricanes, the devastation there, from what I can see, was just fucking horrible, man. I was
It's
good
it's
God.
pretty outstanding. It was difficult to look at driving out. It's interesting because I've lived through tropical storms in northern New York. We've had hurricanes come right up through the Gulf and blast us all the way up there. And I lived on the Canadian border, for Christ's sakes. Nothing ever happened. That's why I was cracking jokes the night before. Ooh, some rain. We might lose power. Look out. I didn't expect just the amount.
The fucking tempt
Of
fate, dude. You should have just shut your fucking mouth,
I
bro.
should have.
You're like that guy that said on the Titanic, not even God can sink this boat. Oh yeah,
Yeah, watch.
yeah, yeah.
But we're okay. I
Well,
mean, we made the best of it those 3 days. We played board games and we charged up all of our devices, with the cars throughout the day. So at nighttime we had movie night and then turn off the damn because we had those wick oil lamps. Turn
mhm.
those off, go to bed, man. It's when we ran out of food. It's like we have got to go.
Right.
But we're doing okay now. Everything's good. We're trying to get back into a sense of normalcy, trying to get people on employment because, like I said, I'm one of only 4 working, and no one else in my circle. My girlfriend,
Well,
my
I'm just glad your patients were okay though, too, though, because I was worried about them.
yeah, they've all been evacuated to other parts of the state. We're eager to get them back, if for no other reason, so we can get everybody back to work.
Right.
But we had one pass away right away. I think it was just a change. It was one of those unexpected ones. I hear about 2 that are on comfort measures now.
Oh man.
Expected the other one. I'm like, what the hell? That guy was fine. He's only in his 60s. And
Huh.
we're not getting good reports back,
Oh,
weekly
that's not good, man.
people, but that's a story for off the mic.
Right, 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 right. Well, HIPAA, there's only so many things you can talk about with your job with that whole thing.
Exactly. But yeah, Travis, what has been going on in your world besides deciding to come slumming this evening?
Nothing but work, man. Nothing but work.
All right, glad we had you.
Nothing. But I have the next couple of days off, so that's pretty awesome.
Nice.
See, I told you not to worry, Bush.
Right? It's just Metal Mike. Metal Mike we got to worry about it.
Yeah, man. I was psyched to hear from you, Mike, about being on with you guys.
Well, we talked about it in the past, and I just thought, fuck, why not? And we want to have another guy who's been a loyal listener to the show and longtime friend of not just the Metal Mike show and the Big Bushy Power Hour and Plug podcast, but also a longtime friend of Rock and Metal Combat podcast, and that's Kevin Warham. But right now we're just trying to coordinate our schedules. And God love him, I told him, well, we'll shoot for November 2nd. And he went on Facebook and was like, I'm going to be on the Plug podcast November 2nd. And it's like, thanks, Mike. He's like so excited to be on,
I know, and it's like, we got to talk to him because
yeah, I'll take care of it, dude. I'll talk to him. I'll reach out to him and tell him, hey, man.
I don't expect internet back in my place for months.
Right.
Like
so
our cable company
and I'll explain. Kevin's cool though. He'll understand, man. He's a good guy. I just kind of feel like, and with him, what we'll probably do is just talk about his rock and metal history, because what's interesting about Kevin is he knows all those guys. Especially you're like anybody in the Florida death metal scene, Kevin knows them personally. He's friends with a lot of those guys,
Yes.
He knows the guys that were in Obituary and Death and Morbid Angel and all them, So I'm sure he'll have some fun stories to tell. And it's fucking Kevin, man. Kevin rules.
Oh yeah.
He's God, according to some people. So
The man, the myth, the legend. It'll be good to have him.
when he gets on here, I'm gonna have to tell him, I'm like, I'm sorry, dude, I'm not convinced of your existence. I'm an agnostic. So
Jesus Christ.
no, I love Kevin.
Travis on here because we're going to talk about the 1983 film Eddie and the Cruisers. Travis, you actually had to go and find it to be able to watch it. Is that accurate?
Yes, I have a Fire Stick, and I found an app that you can watch movies for free. I hope the government's not watching this, by the way.
Cinema?
But yeah, cinema. Yeah, I found
got it too.
I found Eddie and the
That Pabst
Cruisers,
Blue,
and
did I just see a Pabst Blue Ribbon can? Travis?
yeah, that's mine.
One of my favorite lines. You want a beer? Sure. What do you drink? Heineken. Heineken. Fuck that shit. Pabst Blue Ribbon. Love Blue Velvet. Sorry, had to do it. Go ahead.
Nice. Well, I couldn't find Rolling Rock at my local liquor store, so I had to settle for Pabst Blue Ribbons, which is my second favorite.
There you go, man.
Drinking water because I'm at work, and that would be tacky to drink on the job. No, that's
well, I got to work in the morning, so I can't drink, man.
I found Eddie and the Cruisers, thankfully, and I watched it, and you'll hear my thoughts soon.
All right,
Well,
sweet.
quick question. Had you ever heard of the film, Travis? Were you aware of its
Oh
existence at
yeah.
all?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Because I
I
was.
mean,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Um, on Apple Music, they have these playlists where it goes rock hits of 1980, 1983, 1984. And I went through 1984 and I found On the Dark Side from John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. And I'm like, oh, what's that from? And I found it's from Eddie and the Cruisers. And I planned on watching that movie at some point, but it just has so much stuff going on that I put that on the back burner until now.
All right, cool. Cool.
Nice. I had actually never seen it either. It was just the other night, is why I even brought it up to Metal Mike. I had just watched it that day. My girlfriend has it on DVD, and since there's no internet, hence no cable, we've been watching DVDs. And I watched that movie, and we'll talk about that later. But I got a hold of Metal Mike. I was like, "Hey, dude, this might be something we could talk about." And he just blew up about it because Metal Mike, this is a movie you're very familiar with.
Very, very. Yeah. And well, yeah, very, very familiar with it. And I went ahead and rewatched it again, even though I own the DVD. I have it in my Blu-ray DVD collection. Um, it's pretty important movie to me, man. I mean, and so there's that side of it, but it's also the fact that I was kind of blown away that you had not seen it before, Bushy. I was like, what, really? Because it just, I just always assume that because, and the reason why is because, you know, I did a bit of research on the film as well, besides just watching it, and I knew that the movie was not a box office hit when it was released. Um, the soundtrack was bigger at the time than the movie.
Right.
Part of that though is the whoever was what are they distributing the film kind of fucked up because the movie was supposed to come out in the summer of 83 and it doesn't come out until like the autumn or almost winter of 84 or 83, same year. I'm sorry, not 84. But they were targeting it for a younger audience because of the soundtrack. They wanted kids to go see the movie. Well, they didn't because it didn't come out when it was supposed to.
Right.
So the movie kind of bombed big time. And then once again, and this happens to a lot of films, and I think even more so even now than ever with streaming, it took a while. Sometimes it takes a while for a film to find its niche. You can go down the list of movies over the years that, and especially now with cable and with cable, and then of course there was VHS and all that, and now of course with streaming, from VHS to Laserdisc to DVD to Blu-ray and all that,
Oh yeah.
films have been able to find a second life.
Yeah.
Before that, it was only through, actually, believe it or not, old school television. That's how my mom and dad discovered a lot of the old films from the 30s and 40s, is because, well, television was just starting. They had to have content. What better content than old movies? So they would
Right.
show all these movies. In fact, that's how It's a Wonderful Life became the classic it was. That maybe didn't do that well. It was almost forgotten about. And then around Christmas, hey man, we got to have something to show. They started showing that movie. Boom. Now It's a Wonderful Life is considered a beloved Christmas film, but at the time, people thought it was sappy and corny. Blade Runner, another movie that didn't make a big deal splash when it came out. Like we loved it, but a lot of people, it just didn't connect for whatever reason.
The Shining.
Yeah,
Shining.
there you go. Yeah. And
Shining, Home Alone.
Well, even Excalibur wasn't a huge hit when it came out. But now it's considered the definitive cinematic King Arthur film. There's a lot of movies that, some of them, it's weird. Some movies become huge box office, successes, and they end up becoming a classic as well. We have those type of movies too: Jaws, Star Wars, whatnot. But you also have your ones that, for whatever reason, didn't find their niche. And Somewhere in Time, one of my mother's favorite films with Christopher Reeve.
Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour. Yeah.
Great movie, but you know what? It bombed at the box office. Bombed. And then bam, cable. Everybody watches it and like, and how many times have you done that where you watch a movie on DVD or on cable or streaming and you're like, man, that's a good fucking movie, that for whatever reason, either you felt like, I don't know, I'm interested, but because that's the way I am. When I see a trailer for a film, sometimes I'm like, oh, I got to go see that. Then there's other ones where like, oh, I'll wait till it comes out on streaming or, whatever. And then
Yeah.
there's others where I'll be like, I'll be sure to miss that.
Yeah.
And even what's funny about the I'll be sure to miss that is I've been wrong before. There's been times where I thought, man, this movie looks fucking stupid. But then when I actually have friends of mine go, dude, it was really good, I'll check it out. And I'll be like, wow. So sometimes you just don't know. You just don't know. And you can't always judge a film by their trailers.
Yeah.
I felt that way when I was on demand and I found Valley Girl. I'm like, oh, this ought to be stupid. I checked that out and I loved it, man.
Dude, that's a classic. That's a classic 80s teen movie.
The title threw me off a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, that movie's kind of considered right up there with like Porky's and Fast Times at Richmond High and those type of, that era. Even though Porky's takes place in the 50s, ironically enough, though, Porky's is directed by Bob Clark, who directed Christmas Story. So I saw that up there.
And Black Christmas.
I gotta say, for me, it's not as nonsensical as you might think, Metal Mike, me not knowing this movie. 1983, we were in Heidelberg, Germany. We're looking at 8 years old. I go see what my dad wants to see. And at that point, he's listened to a lot of country music. You might hear some Zeppelin, he would play the Born Again album, which always threw me off. And
because your dad knew what was up, dude.
Right. Those are the only two Black Sabbath albums he had was Paranoid and Born Again.
Really?
But yeah, he wasn't a head at all. He wasn't a rock and roll guy. So you're also limited to what you can see on post. So if it wasn't doing well stateside, it wouldn't have made it to our
theater. How old would you have been in 1983 though, Bush? 8. Yeah, see.
Yeah, I'd have been 8. So by the time
I was in junior high when that movie came out, and I'll never forget the first time I watched it. I was sick that day. I wasn't feeling. I had I think a strep throat infection or something. I was feeling like shit, man. But so, what are you going to do when you're feeling like shit? You lay on the couch and you watch movies, right?
Yeah, I went to the theater when I was feeling like shit to see Wayne's. I went to the theater when I was feeling like shit to see Wayne's World.
Well, there you go. So you basically are like Typhoid Mary. You went and infected a bunch of people. Awesome, Bush. Yeah. Anyway,
Welcome.
You're like tough it out like I am. But there is something about that, letting something kind of run its course to where you build up your immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to get into too much of that though. But yeah, the movie for me is I was sick. And it was on cable. It was coming on. And I remember I was familiar with On the Dark Side because there was a buddy of mine, real tall dude, man. God, he was fucking huge, even in junior high. But star basketball player. His name was Lance Bristow. Real nice guy, man. He was one of those guys that was a popular kid, but he never acted like, well, I'm bet. You know how some of them, they let it get to their head. Lance was just a super nice guy, and so when we're playing football, he kept singing this On the Dark Side to himself, and I'm like, what the fuck are you singing, dude? Because I've never heard it. And he was like telling me, and he goes, it's just, and then I heard it on the radio, and I was like, oh, that's the song Lance was singing. So that was my first association, and then of course, even back then, HBO would play trailers, especially when it was for a movie that they're going to air, So they play the Eddie and the Cruisers trailer, and I'm like, well, that looks kind of interesting, man. And that was when I got hooked, and it was coming on. So I said, all right, man, I'll watch this, man. And I just watched it and fell in love with it, man. I mean, everything about it. I thought it was a well-written story. I thought the acting was great. The soundtrack is amazing.
Yeah.
And the band, and what's funny is, John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown band were kind of like really popular on the East Coast. They had cut a few albums. They weren't big nationally, so they were kind of like the perfect band to do this with because they couldn't pick an established band where everybody knows their songs. Now everybody on the East Coast was familiar with Tender Years and On the Dark Side and some of these other songs, but they weren't familiar with it. A lot of their stuff, where I lived, I had never heard of the Beaver Brown Band, didn't know anything about them, but they were touring, kind of like what Twisted Sister was doing in the area they lived, where they were huge. A lot of bands, some of them that never make it big, like Snow in LA, who had Carlos Cavazo from Quiet Riot was in that band. Everybody thought they were going to be as big as Van Halen. Didn't happen.
That one hit Informer.
Huh?
Didn't they have that one hit Informer?
That's a terrible rapper.
Yeah.
You know, another band I think, like off subject, another band I thought should have been huge is a Canadian band called Coney Hatch.
I've heard of.
They have a great song called Devil's Deck. That first album's really good. The second one has it's more a foreigner type of sound on the second one, but it's still pretty damn good. So
Huh.
yeah, Coney Hatch, that's another band I think should have gotten bigger. Out of all,
I mean, if we're going to go down the list of bands that should have been bigger than they were, that could be a whole episode unto itself, man.
I'm down.
Speaking
for
of
that
which,
one,
tell you what, man, we might have you on for one of those because I mean, seriously, there are all kinds of bands that I think should have been much bigger than they were. That for whatever reason got marginalized. Some more than others, though, because at least with some of those bands, people heard of. Like people who are into rock and metal know who Fastway are. But Fastway was a band, even though they had Fast Eddie Clark for Motorhead, he started it with Pete Wave UFO. Pete Way couldn't be a part of it for
he was
contract
still
reasons.
obligated to UFO at that time,
Right.
And
they go ahead and, you know, but Fast Eddie forms the band anyway. I love Fastway. I think they were a terrific band,
yeah.
and they had, I mean, they got played around my rock station, you know, KC95 quite a bit, but for whatever reason though, they got marginalized, and that's happened with a lot of bands. Lizzie Borden is another one that comes to mind for me.
I
It should have
wouldn't
been
have known
much
about
bigger.
Fastway if it wasn't for Trick or Treat.
But you know what? Again, Trick or Treat did for them kind of what Eddie and the Cruisers did for John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band, because I mean, really though, even then, Fastway was a bit more known. They were going on tour. They were opening for people like Ozzy. You know, they were being. I mean, John Cafferty and them was pretty much just the East Coast area and that region of the country, and that was it. You know, they weren't getting. You know.
And you know, there was a band that Pete Way, as soon as he left UFO after the Mechanics album, he formed a really cool band called Wasted. With this
I've heard of them.
Finn.
Yeah, they were good
Vices,
too.
I think that's the name of the album. It has Love Loaded and
and it's spelled just like his last name, Waysted.
They have
a
great cover. They do a really cool cover of Somebody to Love from Jefferson's Airplane.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that first Wasted album rules. And I love Pete Way. I love everything Pete Way does.
Right on, man.
All right, so how do we want to talk about this movie?
Well, do we want to go? Do we want to do like a thorough, like, because I mean, I'm sorry, man. I mean, do we want to have to put spoilers for a film that's fucking, I don't know, and maybe I shouldn't be like that because some of us have only seen the movie recently, so maybe we shouldn't do a whole review or retrospective of the film.
Fuck them. We're going to talk about the whole movie.
Okay, cool. All right, man.
Are we going to scene by scene it? That seems monotonous.
Well, you know what? Will you guys go on? I'll be right back.
I wouldn't say scene by scene, dude. All right, cool. I wouldn't say scene by scene, but I definitely want to talk about at least certain scenes. I mean,
Things are important.
I mean, I just, like I said, I just thought it was a really, really cool film. Even the way it starts with you hearing the crowd, Eddie, 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 and then it goes into on the dark side, and you see the old film footage of them, which you find out that's the performance from that is being filmed. I'm talking within the storyline of the movie, within that, you know, not real life. Obviously, it's a movie, but
Eddie and the Cruisers is like rock star. It's not real,
right? Or even on a funnier level, like you know,
Spinal Tap.
Yeah, Spinal Tap. It's about you know, where Spinal Tap's a mockumentary on you know. This is done very seriously, though. I mean, it's got its funny moments, though. There are some funny lines and there are some funny things about the film, but it's very, yeah. As I said, I thought the beginning of it, where you hear the crowd, you know, Eddie, Eddie, and then it goes into the dark side, and they're watching this film footage. It's these, you know, media people.
Yeah.
And it's at that college that comes into play later in the film, man.
Yeah.
I put two and two together. Something I realized, oh, that's the college that, you know, there were little things I had forgotten about the film because I hadn't watched it in a while. You know, and Eddie's doing the song, and of course you've got the the reporter Maggie and her cohorts, and they're all talking about On the Dark Side and how it was the #1 song in the country in 1963, and how and what happened essentially to the band. They did the one album, Tender Years, and it was a big hit, and they were kind of on their way, and then all of a sudden Eddie seems to either have killed himself or had an accident. And then, of course, they talk about the saxophonist Wendell dying, and it was just like they kind of imploded, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, what if Eddie's still alive? And I like the one guy. I like it. Eddie swam away from the car, and on the side of the, it was Jim Morrison and Amelia Earhart flew him to Paris where they're living in sand.
I love
that was funny. That was a great line. And which I'm going, yeah, but Jim Morrison wasn't dead then, dude. I mean, Jim Morrison didn't die until what, early 70s? 71, yeah.
70, 71, yeah.
But it was still funny.
I dug all that too.
I like how she said that because she talks about the French author, the poet Arthur Rimbaud, and how A Season in Hell, and guess what the album was going to be called? So right then, when the first time I watched it, I was already intrigued. I'm like, A Season in Hell. That's a crazy name for an album that's going to be released in 1964, man. Yeah. It was like, whoa, okay, what's going on here? And what if he did the same thing Rimbaud did, just disappears.
Yeah.
Now Rimbaud, I don't think did it as dramatically as Eddie did. He didn't make it look like he died. He just poofed.
Yeah.
Went away. Eddie, man, I mean, yeah, he's like, fuck this. I'm going out with a bang, I guess.
Right.
Going out.
Oh, no. What were your thoughts on just those first few minutes, Travis? Were you like, oh boy, this might be something worth watching, or oh my God, I got to watch it to go on this show?
The thing that stood out to me, I love the music.
Oh yeah.
It's like, to me, across, like, at that time, it was cross between the Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band and Southside Johnny. And I love that kind of stuff. I love that music. And I was really, really pleased with the music I was hearing. I loved it. And I immediately went to Apple Music. I downloaded that son of a bitch. Yeah, it was really good. I love the music so far. That's what dragged me into it.
Same. Well, I heard that on the Dark Side. I was like, whoa, I remember that song. I remember that being a hit somewhere, which is
a big hit. It was
because it's like, it's not a true story, people. But
and Tender Years was a big hit too.
Yeah.
And to believe it or not, John Cafferty said it was kind of bittersweet because they were really happy that these songs was a hit, but yet when they're doing the videos, it's film footage from the movie.
Yeah.
It's Michael Pray as Eddie singing the song. And that kind of bothered John a little bit because he felt like, okay, well, we're successful. We helped make the soundtrack a success, but yet we're not getting to, I mean, they got love from it, and I'm sure they made lots of money. But like you said, it was a little bittersweet because they had been working so hard to make it. When they finally do, I mean, they get to taste the sweet of success, but not totally.
Right.
Like John Cafferty could walk down the road right now and nobody's going to know who the fuck he is unless you're somebody who lives on the East Coast, probably. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, even with the success of that soundtrack, and like I said, I think it is the music. Like, let's be honest, man. If they don't get a really good band to do the soundtrack for this film, as good a story as it is, and it's a really good story, and it's well done. I think it's a well-directed film. I think it's a well-done movie. But I don't think it would be the cult classic that it is today without that fucking soundtrack.
They chose the right band for that.
They did. It was the perfect band.
And I gotta say, for the song "Down on Your Knees,"
yes,
I love that song. Am I hearing the Pink Panther theme at the beginning of that song? It sounds like the opening to the Pink Panther.
Yeah. I never really thought about that.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that.
Yeah,
where he's introducing the band on stage.
Yeah, I picked up on that too. I was like, wait a second. Now, in that opening scene, because I've only watched it 2 or 3 times since I talked to you, Metal Mike. I can't remember if we saw Tom Berenger playing the keyboard or the piano or whatever it was.
They show him because what they did is while they're watching the concert film,
They're
They
going
go
back and
to
forth.
Eddie, and then they go to all the band members. Well, there's Joanne Carlino, Eddie's girl, and she was, co-vocalist and played,
Yeah, okay, I remember all
you
that.
know, tambourine and whatnot. And then you had Wendell on the sax, you had Kenny on the drums, Sal holding everything down the bass. That guy on the keyboards, man. He was the lyricist. They
Tony
nicknamed him the
Toms.
Word Man, which I thought was really cool that they gave him a nickname, Word Man. I mean,
Birdman, yeah.
yeah, I love that. I loved it. I thought that was really, really cool right off the bat. I'm like, oh, so he's the guy who wrote all the lyrics, man. Because I think the lyrics to a lot of those songs were really cool. So the fact that they were able to use that, because you may not know this, this is actually based on a novel, but the novel and the book are a lot different.
Hey,
Right.
And the
wow.
novel is more of almost like a murder mystery. It involves the tapes for the album, but it's almost like somebody's trying to, they're killing these other past musicians of the band to get to those tapes, which is like a totally, and the filmmakers are like, they like the idea of it, but they wanted to make it more like a Citizen Kane type of film where this guy who was famous, you're looking on his life and you're looking, because if you watch the movie closely, you kind of start realizing most of the film is taken from Frank's point of view,
Yeah,
but there are moments where it's taken from other characters' point of view.
right.
And I thought that's what was really cool about it, as you go and and Frank gets reunited with each band member or a member of, I mean, Doc, the manager's not a member of the band, but he was part of the family, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, it was
Okay.
just really, really cool.
And I gotta say about Eddie, it's funny. This is a really weird comparison. He looks like Glenn Danzig, but he sounds like Damone from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Who from
See that.
Fast Times, dude?
Damone.
Damone.
Oh, I never thought about it. That guy, that was kind of his big break. Michael Pare was uh, a chef in New York, and I guess some lady saw him, and he's like, but he was type of the chef where he's preparing the food. It was one of those restaurants where they prepare the food for him, and he was such a charming and funny guy. She was like, I think he could be an actor. He had never acted a day in his life, dude,
Nice.
and it kind of gave him a career
Yeah, he
because
nailed it, man.
Yeah,
yeah, and
nailed
after
it.
that, he did Streets of Fire, which is also a really cool movie. It's called A Rock and Roll Fable. And that movie's got it's got him and Diane Lane and Willem Dafoe is the villain. And everything's like set in,
I
it
love
looks like from
Diane.
the late 50s, oh yeah, late 50s, early 60s. Rick Moranis is also in it.
wow.
And
Oh.
but
What's
you
it
also
called?
have, it's called Streets of Fire.
Oh, I gotta check that out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, dude, because with that film, you've got like they're using the old microphones, the big bulky fucking mics that they had in the 50s, but yet there's laser light shows. So when they call it a rock and roll fable, that's what it means. It's like it's set in a world where it's like our world, but yet it's different because some of the technology looks retro, but some of it looks modern. And that's what was kind of cool about it, man. And yeah. He was in that. He did the Philadelphia Experiment, which was a science fiction film, which was really good. He was kind of up and on his way, and after that, he kind of more became a character actor, where he's playing smaller roles. So he didn't quite have the career where Tom Berenger had already. I think he had already done The Big Chill. So this was his next project after it. And Berenger, of course, became a big movie star there for a while.
I'm a big Berenger fan. I mean, even the stuff that's not as good as other things, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
But then he's got those movies that are just great, Last of the Dogmen. I'm constantly telling people they got to check out that.
That's a good movie, man.
Of course, Platoon. He
was amazing. And what's funny is how I like how Oliver Stone cast, like right there, Willem Dafoe before Platoon played a lot of villains.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, Stone makes him the good guy or the protagonist, the one that everybody. It was weird though, because everybody in the platoon, they looked up to both guys for different reasons. And then you got Barnes, who's a hardcore motherfucker.
Yeah.
Who and at first even I was on his side, but then I'm like, whoa, bro, whoa, what are you doing there, bro? Take it down about 20%, man. But what a great job he did, man. I mean, he was amazing as Sergeant Barnes. Yeah, I
I
love
thought he
Tom.
was great as Frank, and that's what really. Once I had it in, because I've heard about this movie. You know, Ian's talked about it on Rock and Metal. You know, I've heard about this movie, but I see Tom Berenger. I'm like, okay, I'm in. There's somebody I know, and it's somebody that I actually like his films, so I'm in.
And he's the character that kind of pulls you into the story.
Yeah, yeah. And I,
Because it goes from Maggie going, well, that's our hook. We're going to talk about how the tapes are missing, and Eddie never found a bite. That's our hook. And then it goes from that to you literally see Frank driving to his job, and
listen to
he
the
turns on
radio.
the radio, and one of his songs, Wild Summer Nights, from when he was with the Cruisers, which is a great song, by the way, is playing. And it's like, so even in this story, there's a resurgence of Eddie and the Cruisers music. Like people are kind of getting back into them, you know. It's like, you know, they've almost like they're rediscovering this awesome band and what could have been. And keep in mind, they've not heard of Season in Hell yet. They have no idea what this out, you know, and that's what I mean. That's why I really like. So he shows up to school, and he's doing his thing, and then of course that's when after class ends or whatever, he's just chilling, and he starts thinking, and that's when they flash back to when he first meets the band.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, even though maybe someone that's probably new to the film would say the relationship between Frank and Joanne is a bit rushed, because you can tell, like from the scene where he hands her the poetry book, that they have something for each other, for sure.
Yeah, there's some chemistry there.
But with that said, I think they have great chemistry in the movie.
Yeah,
oh yeah. Like I think everybody,
wonderful.
as far as the actors, I think everybody. I mean, come on, man. Because look how many guys. Not only do you have now Michael Pare went on to do some really cool things, but you got Joe Pantoliano, Joey Pants as they call him, playing their manager. My God, look at all the roles he's done and what he's done. You got Tom Berenger as the guy who, and I liked all the characters. And here's another thing. I don't know if you know this, Travis. The saxophonist is the actual saxophonist from the Beaver Brown Band. He is the only real life member of the band.
I looked them up on Wikipedia, and I found that out.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you knew that, but so
Yeah,
so you get to know. She walks in. At first, it's her, and obviously Tom's starstruck, and fuck, I can't blame him. I had the biggest crush on that gal when I first saw that.
What's her? You know what? Since I'm new to the movie, who plays Joanne?
Her name is Helen Schneider. She's actually, believe it or not, this is funny. She's a big star in Germany. She's a dancer and a singer.
She is absolutely gorgeous in this.
Yeah. Well, I like them like Italian. I think she might be. I like them dark complected Italian girls.
Me too. I love my Italian.
And the little Jewish gals like Natalie Portman. I'm like, hot damn. Anyway, so yeah, I don't blame Frank for liking her, and yeah, you could definitely tell. And some people might say, hey, that's Rush, but hey, man, believe it or not, there are some people that I have fallen for from the first time I saw him.
And you could tell the relationship between her and Frank is different than with Eddie, because Eddie's a little bit more abrasive with her, when Frank is just being honest, and he makes her feel good. He doesn't try to just get in her pants immediately. He's like, he legitimately thinks she is cool. He likes her.
And she is the reason he joins the band, because she recommends him to Eddie.
How am I doing so far? Am I doing all right?
You're doing great, dude.
Okay, cool. I'm a little.
You're doing fine. So we'll just keep on talking. Bushy had to step out for a minute, folks. But yeah, as they, because so and I like that whole part, because you got them, they come in and they all walk in. First, she comes in and she's just looking at him, and he's like totally smitten right off the bat. He's attracted to her. Like I said, can't blame him. Then Eddie walks in behind her and puts his arm around her. And the way he did, like, Eddie's a cool motherfucker, though. He's that guy that, you want, like, women want him and men want to be him.
Right.
He's that guy. He's like, because he's so fucking cool, man. Like, Eddie doesn't really lose his cool very often. I mean, he does later on in the film, but most of the time, he's pretty laid back, not a very demonstrative guy with his feelings. I mean, obviously he loves Joanne. You can tell he loves her. I mean, he doesn't mistreat her in any way, but
No,
he's kind of aloof. He's a little, he's got his cards close to the vest,
he's like a protector of her.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously she was his girl, and we can talk about a little bit about that before or later, but then he walks in, and then Sal walks in, and what I love is Eddie's like, he's so cool. He has other motherfuckers do his talking for him because he just looks at him, and then when Sal walks in, he looks at Sal and he nods, and then Sal goes, "Tell Tommy Eddie and the Cruisers are here," and the rest of the guys are walking in too. It was just really a cool scene, I thought. And then of course, they're rehearsing and everything, and then when they start doing the cover of Betty Lou has a new pair of shoes, and Sal's wanting to do it traditionally, and you got Eddie going, "Wait, wait, wait," they get in a big argument and all that.
I
Yeah,
love that scene, and let me tell you why.
okay, cool.
I did my circuit on the cover band scene, and dude, let me tell you, there's always that guy. Everybody else wants to do their thing, and you always got that guy. I mean, it's kind of like the Mark Wahlberg and Rockstar. You've got to do it the right way, man, because we're honoring the music that we're playing. And it's like I just want to rock out with my cock out, dude. So I loved that dynamic with Eddie and Sal bitching about you got to play it the way it was written. I thought that was great because that took me back to my band days.
Oh, sure, sure. It's very realistic. And the fact that and then when he asks Joanne what she thinks, what are you asking her for? She's got a brain, don't she? Yeah, but you're going to ask your girlfriend? You know she's going to side with you kind of thing. But Sal don't know anything. He's just a dumb guinea, huh? And then later he's like saying, he goes, "You dumb guinea." I love that, man. And that's what was cool about that scene is you could tell that Sal and Eddie go way back
Yeah.
just from that interaction right there, that they have been friends and they have been friends for a really, really long time. And I think it kind of comes into play later that I think Sal was a little jealous of Frank. I think he was jealous of Frank's relationship with Eddie.
Oh yeah,
Because
that comes out later.
yeah, very much so later. And just certain things they were said, because remember when Frank goes to see him later, he's like, "Well, I don't know how he would react if he were to see me." Almost like he was kind of afraid to
Yeah,
see Sal, like he didn't know if Sal was going to be like, "Hey, how you doing?" or "Fuck you,"
yeah.
but it was a really cool scene. I love that. And I thought it was very realistic because I've heard bands argue about shit like that. I've been the Frank in the situation where they'll ask me and I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, I got nothing or I don't have an opinion. But Frank did. He said, "I think it needs a caesura,"
Yeah.
which is a literary phrase. And I love how Eddie goes, "See, like I said, with the cesarean." It was so,
Serious. Yeah.
and then he goes, "Here, I'll give you an example." So he starts reading the poetry and he reads it really, and he goes, and then when he gets done, he goes, "That's, and then he goes, sounds like shit, right?" And he goes, "Now do it." And then he does it the way, and he goes, "Now that's got class. Does that have class or what, Sal?" It just cracked me the fuck up, man. I was just like, you know, um, and I think also Sal, as much as he loved Eddie, he did. It was one of those things where he loved him, but he did resent him a little bit because he says it later in the film.
Yeah.
Um, Eddie was a very talented, smart, creative guy, and I mean, to me, the whole thing of it is, especially when he says later, because after that, you have, Maggie comes to talk to Tom. And I love that scene too, where she's asking him all these questions. And he goes, "What happened that last night?" And he goes, "There's no way I'm going to go into that with you." And
Right.
she's like, "Well, why not?" And he goes, "Maybe because I'm alive and Eddie's dead, and he was my friend. And I just met." I thought that again, very realistic. I would have reacted the same way, like, "Hey, man, you know, I'm not gonna fucking tell you shit because you're just trying to get a story and you just want to." Since I think at that time Frank thought Maggie's intentions were less than noble. Like she was just trying to sensationalize Eddie's death or whatever, which is not her goal at all. She's actually wanting to pay tribute to Eddie and the Cruisers and what they did. And she realizes even with the first album, these guys were a bit ahead of their time. They were a little ahead of the curve of what was going on in rock and roll. And I don't know, it was cool. And then later he he comes home and his fucking place is just fucking been ransacked, man. And he's like, what the hell? And later he's smoking, and that's when he starts remembering. And of course, you hear the piano intro to Tender Years. And as he's thinking, then you see he's in the bar playing it.
Yeah.
And then she walks, man, looking hot as hell. And, she's checking him out, and and she likes what he played. And then, he's got that book, Arthur Rimbaud. So at this point in time, you can tell Frank's pretty artistic himself, especially when it comes to literary things. And he does have some musical talent because he can play the piano. And I think Joanne instantly recognizes that.
See, I didn't realize the movie was going to take a dark turn. I know nothing about the book, so all that was news to me.
Yeah.
But when he gets back to his room or whatever, or his house, his mobile home, yeah, it all just destroyed. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And they kind of build this. And I was even like, I know that by the end of the movie, I'm like, look, this motherfucker's dead. They're trying to make me think he's alive. They're not going to do that. That's what every movie of the 80s tried to do.
Right.
Not going to get me like that, but that's what they're trying to do the whole time, is that he's alive, and he's trying to get these tapes.
Now, did you think at the time when Frank came home and you saw the place just fucking dilapidated, and I'm asking both you guys, did you think, oh, somebody's looking for those tapes, or were you just like, what was your thought? Because remember, he hadn't went to see Doc yet. It was Doc who made Frank realize why his place was ransacked.
Right. I don't know. I think at first it just didn't make sense. It's like, what the
okay
hell?
So you were like, why is somebody tearing Frank's place up?
Yeah.
Got you.
What about you, Travis? I mean, come on, it couldn't have been that on the nose, could it?
It's definitely someone's been ransacking looking for those tapes. It had to be Doc coming in there.
Well, we all know it was Doc now, but
Yeah.
my point to you is when Frank comes home, you've just watched the film, so when Frank comes home and his place is fucking ransacked, did you put that together like, oh, somebody's looking for those tapes that Maggie's talking about? Did you
hell
think
yeah.
that?
Hell
Huh?
yeah. Hell yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So you're like Frank, Bush. You're not as quick as me and Doc are. It's cool, man.
No,
Me and
I'm
Travis
just-
are quick like Doc.
I just sit back and let the movie entertain me. I ain't trying to figure shit out.
Well, all right then, dude. Fuck. Maybe that's why you say you're easily entertained. But
That's exactly it.
okay, cool. So you're one of those guys who, and don't take this the wrong way, because there are a lot of people that watch movies this way, where you take your brain, you set it here on the shelf,
Yes.
and you just watch the fucking movie.
Yes. So
Okay.
what happens, I'm never the guy that figures it out 3 scenes ahead. I'm always the guy going, what the fuck?
Man, my dad was terrible at that. Like, did you know? I don't know if I ever told you this, and I don't want to get in the Star Wars black hole or whatever. But I got to tell you this. When we went to see Star Wars originally, keep in mind, I'm only 6, 7 years old. My dad, on the way home, says, I think Darth Vader may be Luke's father. And we were like, And my dad's like, think about it. He says that, in the way he, because he tells him his father was a Jedi Knight, and he was an amazing pilot, and and all this, and then when you find out later, Darth Vader, who was a pupil of mine until he turned to evil, and he tells him, you betrayed and murdered your father. He said there were certain clues, like with Uncle Owen. Well, Luke isn't just in the farmer, Owen. He's got too much of his father. That's what I'm afraid of. It was like my dad paid attention to that stuff, man. He paid attention to when they do when they're attacking the Death Star and Vader comes out with the TIE fighter and his TIE fighter, and he's fucking blowing X-Wing fighters up left and right. Oh, so Vader's a great pilot too. My dad said he wasn't 100% sure that Vader, but he's like, I could maybe see him going that way. So, of course, when Empire Strikes Back comes out, I'm so brilliant. I was right. That's my dad, too. I mean, he did the same thing to my mom when they went to see Planet of the Apes at the Fox Theater in 1968. He about halfway through, he nudges her. She's just like, God damn it, Gene. So yeah, he was, and I think part of it is because my dad read a lot of science fiction and fantasy and horror. So he was always like, he was always looking for that,
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of rubbed off on me, Bushy. So sorry.
It kind of reminds me of the time I was watching on Her Majesty's Secret Service with my buddy. And Who plays Tracy in that movie? Tracy Bond.
That's a long
Helen Rigg or
Yeah, Diane Rigg. Diane Rigg.
Diana Riggs, yeah,
Yeah.
from the Avengers, the TV show.
Like when James Bond and her
Mrs.
tell each other,
Peel
when they
herself.
tell each other that they love each other, that's a new thing for James Bond to say at that time. My friend takes a look at me and says, "She's gonna die, isn't she?"
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I'm like, oh yeah.
yeah. Well, it's funny because again, Diana Rigg, man, what a hottie she was.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
that's Mrs. Peel from the Avengers, not the comic book Avengers, not the Marvel. The Avengers
Oh,
was a
the
really
British show,
popular
yes.
espionage show in
Love
the
it. Love the
60s.
Avengers.
Yeah, John Steed and Emma Peel. Mrs. Peel, we are needed. But yeah, she was a hottie. And that's funny because that's kind of an at the time, the movie wasn't a big hit because I think it might have been the first Bond movie without Connery, but
My
I think
favorite Bond movie of the
it's a damn
60s,
good
by
one.
the way.
My
Great
favorite one is
cinematography too. That gets overlooked. The cinematography where they
yeah,
go
oh,
to
it's a
Roosevelt
damn good
headquarters.
movie. It's a great movie. My favorite Bond film, believe it or not, is Casino Royale.
Mine's gonna
great.
probably surprise you. License to Kill.
That's your favorite?
Yeah,
Oh, I
I'm a
thought
huge fan of Timothy Dalton.
what's funny about Timothy Dalton though is he kind of wanted to do the Bond more like the books, which is what they ended up doing with Daniel Craig, which is
He did the
interesting.
darker Bond decades before Daniel Craig did.
Yes, he
I think
did.
he's underrated for that because I love Timothy Dalton more
Well,
than
he said
Daniel
he was
Craig.
jealous of Daniel Craig because he goes, he got to do. I wanted to do Casino Royale, like, which
I
I do.
think
I do think Daniel Craig was a great Bond, though. I mean, different, but I thought he did a good
I,
job.
I think Timothy Dalton, I believe, got a very bad contract.
He did.
Yeah, and
Hey,
that's
I
what
like Timothy Dalton, man. Have you ever watched him in the series Penny Dreadful?
I have not.
Oh, he's fucking great in it. Anyway, back to Eddie and the Cruisers. Um, so yeah, so Frank comes home, his place is trash, and as I said, he remembers, and then he goes back in time. He's playing the piano. Him and Joanne, and he owns the book by Arthur Rimbaud, which I thought was pretty interesting. How they had done a like he asked, "Have you ever heard of her?" And she starts describing him, and then you find out she's reading from the back of his book. He goes, "But still the greatest writer that may have ever lived," or whatever. And they have a laugh and everything. He's like, "Well, here, go ahead and borrow it," and everything. But yeah, you can definitely tell there's an attraction or
Oh, definitely.
Oh yeah.
um, um but
And like I said before, I love the chemistry from those performances for Frank and Joanne. I think that chemistry is very believable.
oh, very much so. And
Absolutely, I love it.
so then I know
It
after
doesn't feel like it's fake. It feels like you're actually seeing two people fall in love with each other.
right, and
Beautiful.
then which is again kind of complicated because she's Eddie's girl, and you can tell that there's strong, and it's one of those cases where some people say it's impossible to be in love with two people at the same time. I don't think it is. I think
But
you
you can
can
tell,
care.
but you can tell that Joanne feels more comfortable around Frank because
Yes,
Frank's not so abrasive.
Yeah.
right,
He's like he's picking her brain and she's making
right, and I
her
also
question
think
herself about.
Eddie. Well, like I said, he's just kind of aloof. He's just very kind of guarded. I mean, but so anyway, then it goes to Eddie talking to him, which is again one of my favorite scenes of the film where they're on the beach and he's telling him about, well, our sons right now, they're cool, but they're the kind, like laundry, you can fold them up, you just put them away. You know what I'm saying? And then he goes, I want to write the kind of songs where people envelop them around themselves forever. And he's like, that's the
Exactly.
most you'll ever get out of me, word man. I mean, immediately starts calling him word man. Well, that's the thing. He says, Joanne says, you play the piano and she really likes you, right? And she thinks you might be good for the band. So we're going to try you out, man, if you're down with that. And of course, Frank's like, hell yeah. So he's the guy that's the last addition to the band. They were already, you know, a performing band. They'd been doing gigs, they'd been doing things. So Frank's the new guy,
Yeah.
and I just like that whole scene because then it shows Frank, remember, that's the most you'll ever get out of me, word man, ever. And you can tell that obviously Frank and Eddie, I think, do become quite close. Like they, you know, like, and believe me, I've been in that situation where you're really, really good friends with this cool dude. but he has that hot girlfriend that kind of, you like her, but you can tell she kind of likes you. I have been there. I've been in that situation.
Yeah,
In
she's
fact, I
good
had a
daddy,
friend.
but
I had a
he's good
friend
daddy,
who,
but
and he
she's
called
giving.
me out on it one time because we were both in drafting class. And the interesting thing about Russell and Carrie, unfortunately, is no longer with us. May you rest in peace, Carrie. Um, and she was kind of from the clique crowd. She was, and Russell was the bad boy, the Harley rider, he had the long hair and, but he was cool, right? He was the cool kid. And I was good friends with him. And they ended up hooking up and they became a pretty serious thing. And because of me being a friend, and at that point in time in my senior year, I had done a stand-up comedy show for the Thanksgiving Assembly. So I went from somebody being fairly well known to being very well known after that because I actually ended up winning, which blew me away. That's one thing though. I remember the roar of the crowd and everybody just going fucking nuts because the crowd got to pick the winner and the crowd picked me unanimously. And I was like, "Ooh, I like this. I could get used to this." And that's kind of what got me to where I started doing stand up for a while once upon a time. But back to Russell and Carrie, like I said, it was one of those things where it was almost like opposites attract, or they came from two different worlds type of thing. And I'm his buddy. And I remember there was one time he was talking about how he thought it was cool that she got along so well with all of his friends. Because I was worried about that, because Carrie, she's the clique from the cliques, clique crowd, the popular crowd, and we're the metalheads and the fucking uh potheads, man. Like I didn't know if she was going to get along with all you guys. And then I swear to God, he looks right over him and goes, "Of course, she gets along a little too well with old Tyler here sometimes." And I'm like, "What the fuck?" But she would flirt with me, man, big time. And but again, it made me realize, oh shit, Russell's because I thought maybe it was just it's just in your head, Mike. But then he was like. And he even messed with me. He goes, "Man, dude, you just turned 10 shades of red when I said that." I'm like, "Well, I'm a fucking redhead, dude."
I,
And yeah, it was
I can
funny, man.
relate. I got something funny. This person I used to be friends with, she brought her girlfriend with her. We went to the fair. It was like about 2018, and my friend at that time, she's the kind of lesbian that's a dyke.
Oh,
And her girlfriend, she looks like a freaking model.
right.
So this girlfriend, she's like, I know they're dating, so I'm being respectful, but man, my friend's girlfriend, she was like latching on to me at all times, man. And I'm glad that my former friend's not watching this, but I'm just gonna say, like, I was a little nervous to get on this ride, and she said, "Hey, hold my hand. We'll hold hands throughout the ride." And then afterwards, we get off the ride, she's still holding on to my hand, and my friend just gives me like the death stare. I'm like, "Hey, I can't help it. If she likes me, she likes me."
Well, and who's to know? Her girlfriend, while she may have been her girlfriend, could very well have been bisexual. It is possible. So,
I,
yeah.
but
Trust
just
me, Travis, I could tell you some stories. Or I no, I'm serious. I have been with girls that would tell me, "Hey, I'm gay," but yet whenever I got a girlfriend, they would get all upset and put a guilt trip. "Well, this isn't the first time you picked a girl over me, Mike." And I'm like, "What the fuck, miss? I am gay. What is your problem?" But whatever. That's a whole other fucking story. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is I guess we've all been there. I'm sure you've been there too, Bushy, where there's a gal that's really cool. But me, I'm an honorable guy. I'm never going to cross that line. I never have. But there's been times where I did feel it. Like I'm like, man, you just like okay. In the case of Frank and Joanne, if Eddie wasn't in the picture, it'd have been on. They would have gotten together. They would have hooked up. They would
well,
have hooked up
I
for
think
sure.
they hook up at the end. Am I
Oh, okay, wait, good way of ending there, Travis. No, but
right?
spoiler.
My bad.
40-year-old
No,
movie.
I'm
Well,
just
if you
messing
know
with
what,
you.
it's 41 years old.
Yeah,
Y'all should have watched this movie.
yeah. But uh, all joking around aside though, yeah, I definitely think, because a lot of times with movies, I will have like not, I'll have in my head like, okay, what happened afterwards, and I definitely think you're right with that. I think that's exactly what happens. Um, but anyway, yeah. So Frank joins the band, And then after that, we have out of the blue, Doc calls. He calls Frank.
Yeah.
Hey, Word man, what's going on? And they start talking, and he's like, hey, man, I'm a DJ at a radio station. Come pick me up or come out, man, and say hi. And he does. And, of course, Doc is always scheming. Even then, you can tell he's always got these ideas, and he tries to talk Frank into getting the cruisers back together. But we'll use that because Sal Amano, the bass player, has an Eddie and the Cruisers tribute band that he does, where he's pretty much the original member, and he's got fill-ins for everybody else, and he's doing pretty good with it. And we'll get rid of the losers and we'll get the cruisers, and of course Frank immediately shoots it down. He's like, "Fuck that, Doc. I'm not interested in all that." Well, if I can't convince you, kid, who can I convince?
Yeah.
So he takes him home, and then he shows him his place. Frank's like, well, we got the same decorator, Doc. They hit my place too. And that's when you find out for sure, because he's like, well, what do you think they're after, Frank? I don't know. He's like, think about it. What the music? He goes, just because how do you put it? Something about if they're out to get us doesn't mean we're paranoid. What are you talking about? And he goes, the music lovers. I don't follow you, Doc. And he's like, what are they looking for? What could we have that they think we have that they would want? The fucking tapes, man,
Yeah.
And that's when you realize,
I never made that connection until just now, and I've watched this movie a couple times. What a fucking setup that was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
because now all along it was Doc.
Yeah.
But he set all that up, man. He kind of manipulative, really, Doc is,
yeah.
And I think he was always that way. So yeah, but yeah, it's the tapes, dude. They're after the tapes. And then of course, you have so then he goes to see Sal's act.
Yeah.
And that's when he runs into Maggie Foley, played by the hottest fuck. I always thought she was cute, man. Ellen Barkin, especially back in the day.
Oh yeah.
And she's all like, why don't you come up front? Oh man, I can't do that. Sal's crazy enough to maybe want me to come up on stage with him, And he goes, and she says, well, why are you here? And he goes, well, I just wanted to see how an old friend turned out and how things might have turned out for me as well. And then she's like, well, can I buy you a drink afterwards? And I think because of her approach this time, he's like, yeah, sure, And so, Sal does his whole performance, which again, I love the flashbacks when he's like.
Well, I like how in this one it goes back to, basically Frank writing this song and the whole band.
Yeah, because they start playing on the dark side.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that they're playing on the dark side, and then he starts thinking back and then you hear him playing it and singing it, and it does sound god awful. Tom Berenger, I love you, but you can't sing to save your life. And of course, Doc and Sal are just laughing their ass off at him and making fun of him. And Eddie ain't saying a word. Eddie's just pacing back and forth because he ain't listening to the music. He's listening to the words.
Yeah.
And then when he goes, not bad. And then they're all like, what? And then Doc, what's not bad? He can't sing. He can't play. So what's not bad? They're going back and forth. And he goes, he's got something we need. What's that? Words and music, Doc. And again, that's the first time in the movie you hear those words, words and music.
Yeah.
So then he teaches him how to do it in a rock and roll style. Like, take this, but let's do this. And then as he keeps going and he's got him going. And the next thing the drummer kicks in and, he's playing the guitar and, the girl's doing her thing. And then he looks at Sal, goes, you want vacation or what? And then he just starts playing that bass, man. And there you are. That's the song. And I thought that was really, really cool, man.
Yeah, I enjoyed that scene a lot just because I've written original music with other people, and that's the way it works. You come in with an idea, like, well, change the tempo to this, switch this to that, and then you end up with something that's like way better than you ever started with. So I really enjoyed that scene in particular.
Yes.
I did too. I loved it.
And you can also tell that Frank didn't only just help with the words, but he kind of helped with it. Maybe not all the songs, but the two main ones, on the Dark Side and Tender Years, because if you remember, that's the part where when Joanna's walking in, he's playing the piano part. It's very much Tender Years. You can tell it's done in a classical piano style,
Yeah.
but it's Tender Years, and then of course, Eddie and the band add their stuff to it because you got Wendell with the sax and stuff, and all that. But so yeah, Frank's a pretty important member of the Cruisers. He becomes it, and I think Sal gets a bit jealous of that. I mean, he
Yeah.
loves Frank, but there's a little bit of resentment there, which again, it's only human, it's only natural, because here he's been Eddie's longest and closest friend forever, and this no fucking guy comes along and just fucking, but yeah, it was, so they do the dark, they show how they write that, and then they go back to the band and ending it, and then of course you got Sal, and he does his talking to the crowd, and then he kind of explains, like, you remember when you're cruising and all that, and then he's like, this was the inspiration for this song, and then they kick into Wild Summer Nights, which is another great fucking song, and then again it flashbacks to the band playing it at which is a real venue, by the way, that Tommy Mart's, that's a real, still, I don't know if it still exists today, but it's been there for a number of years. A lot of famous acts have played there, and is it Tony Mart's or Tommy Mart's? I can't remember the name of the
I
club, but
think,
it's a real life venue though. That was a real life thing, and then they, so they're doing Wild Summer Nights, and then they go into Tender Years, and the crowd just goes nuts, and yeah, so they're writing these songs, they're getting this chemistry, there's this buzz about this band. And then, later on, it goes back to Sal, and then he does the whole a cover of those oldies but goodies, Remind Me of You, and which was really cool. And he talks about how he misses Eddie, and sometimes I think he's still out there, not far away at all. Which I'm thinking, if you only knew Sal. And they get done, and then the girl interviews Frank, and then that's when he tells the story about them going back to his old college to perform, and
yeah.
how the rest of the band was like, because it's a very preppy school.
Yeah, it's a finishing school, an all male finishing school.
Right. And and they're all like, Eddie and Sal and them are like, what the fuck is this shit? Kenny, the drummer, even Wendell's like, I don't know about all this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, so they're there. And one of the interesting things is the guy who was, I guess, a classmate of him, who might have been a freshman when Tom was a senior or whatever, he recognizes Frank. Frank's walking around with Joanne around campus. And which I really like that part too, because if you remember, Eddie says, he goes, we don't belong here, man. These people are different. And, and Frank, which it ultimately Frank ended up being right. He said these kids were going to eat them up, like they were going to go crazy. And they do. I mean, when they do perform for these guys, the college goes crazy, man. They're fucking going nuts. So ultimately, Frank was right, because well, they're going to eat us up, Eddie. I'm telling you, they're going to like you. They're just college kids. They're no better. Hey, I didn't say they were better. Word, man. I said they were different. So there you go. There's Eddie being a little abrasive, as Travis had pointed out before. And so they go and they walk around and everything, and I just like that whole scene too, because they're talking about it, about how, Joanne's guidance counselor, she didn't think that she was going to ever amount to anything.
No, there's you can go to beauty school, you could be a secretary.
Right.
And pregnant in a year anyway.
And she was talking about, if you have kids, they won't be any more college material than you are, and he's like, you're too hard on yourself, which I agree with Frank. I'm like, Joanne's not stupid, man. That girl, sharp little cookie there. And as they're talking or whatever, and then when they get back, because there's one part where she says something about, they're talking, and I didn't know what to say to her. Oh, you said you worked in the city. That's fine. And he's like, hey, you're good enough to be here. He goes, you're probably too good, or something about too good for me or whatever. How do you know I'm not? And then they kiss.
Yeah.
And in the distance, Eddie sees everything. And this was an interesting point in the film, because Eddie, that goes to show you that, he's not a hothead, because most dudes would have got up off that porch and fucking punched Frank out. Let's be honest.
No, he's not a hothead. He's instead vindictive.
Oh, vindictive is he's again. You could use the word passive aggressive in a way, because what he does to
He
Frank,
must have been like a Bond villain.
yeah, it was very like he just takes it all in, and and the first part where he gets to him is when they come back. I'm gonna go change. No, you go like that.
Yeah.
So he's already throwing his weight around.
Yeah.
I don't care. You're going like that, man. So he makes him wear his school outfit. They perform, they kill it, which I like that song too. Down on My Knees, great fucking tune.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, love it.
And but yeah, and then that's when he introduces all the cruisers.
What do you call him? Toby something?
Toby Tyler.
Toby
Tyler, man. Which I'm like, why you gotta use my last name, Eddie? But anyway, like, what the fuck?
I was like, man, that's a dick move, but he deserved it.
Hey. Eddie would never have done that if he hadn't been making out with this girl.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Look, as much as I love Frank and Joanne, that wasn't cool. You don't do that. Which I know it was just a moment, and I don't think anything ever happened again. And I'm sure.
But I gotta say though, man, Eddie had a freaking bird's eye view. Like it was like there's the little porch, and then there's the stadium, and then there's Frank and Joanne making out. How he can see through all those people and immediately
because he's dude. He's fucking Eddie Wilson.
He's freaking Eddie. He can do anything he wants to do.
He's fucking Eddie, dude. He's Eddie Wilson.
Psychic powers
above everybody.
Right. But I thought it was really cool because he doesn't say a word. He just watches. And I remember when the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, what's going to happen now, man? And then when he, they do the song and everybody, and then he's like, I'm going to introduce the band. And you are right. They are kind of doing that whole, it's very similar to Pink Panther. And then, he's introducing everybody in the band. And of course, the guy, which by the way, the guy who played his buddy, hey, you forgot one, Ridgeway. That's the kid who played Dennis and Christine.
It's also, it's also the guy that got scared when they were engaging those MiG-28s, and Maverick ended up getting his slot.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. He was also in another movie that involved time traveling, but I can't remember. My Science Project, I think is what it was called. My Science Project. He was in that as well. But no, so he's all like, "Hey, Eddie, you forgot who did I forget?" With that fucking accent,
Yeah.
And he's all like, the keyboard is Ridgeway. Oh yeah, on here in keyboards we got Toby Tyler, and then he's like, fucking give some of this weird that they found him in the circus, this crazy origin story, and
kudos to Frank for going ahead and playing along and finishing, because he could have got pissed off and walked out too.
Oh, I know, but and then when he's playing, and then they get back in the song, and Frank's just seething, man. You could tell, but he almost looked like he wanted to come out behind that piano keyboards and punch Eddie, but I don't know if that'd have been advisable. Because look, I think Frank's cool, and I know he can handle his own because he handles his own platoon. But I think Eddie would have piggied his ass. That's just my personal opinion. But it was, and then of course Eddie jumps out. And if another thing, I think that was to get back at her. He jumps out to the girls in the crowd.
Yeah,
I think that
really
was to rub it in Joanne's face too. It was twofold. It wasn't all about just punishing Frank. But you could tell because when he does it, Joanne's playing her little, but she puts her fucking head down. Like she knew. She fucking knew why Eddie did it for sure. And I'm pretty sure Frank ain't dumb. He knew, because if he doesn't make time with this girl, Eddie would never have done that, man.
Yeah, true story.
And so then he's like, yeah, the next day, I told him I was out and I wanted to quit. And he's like, all right, man, I'll just have somebody else send somebody. Like it was so much, like busted flunk. He's calling the union. And he goes, he asked me to take him for a walk and never said anything for the longest time. And he turns around and looks at me and goes, word, man, we need each other. Words and music. He goes, you did it just like this. Words and music. And I love that whole scene too, where she goes, is that why you quit, Frank? Because you didn't think, because they told you were no good. And he was like, words and music, Maggie. Without Eddie, there was no more music.
Yeah.
And I just, because that's the part where he goes, you don't really think Eddie's still alive. And she's like, no, but what about the tapes? And she's just wanting people to, like she said, I want the fans to hear that music. Let the world find out and figure out if it's any good or not, which again, it makes total sense. Because if you had a legendary, that would be like finding out Leonard Skinner had an album that was never released or something. Any band that was no longer together or a crucial member of that band dies, and there's this, you'd want to find it. I mean, hell, I've heard rumors that there's like, and it's been confirmed by a few of the guys in Sabbath and Zeppelin, that they actually recorded some music together, the members of Sabbath and Zeppelin. And they say, oh, it's probably just laying in some box somewhere in a studio. So, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I would love to hear that, man.
Gotta be
Led Sabbath. How fucking
Beatles.
badass would that be, man? But yeah, so I definitely think that, again, very realistic. If you have this band, this album's done, it's in the can, they never release it, you would want to hear it, especially if you're a fan of the first album, Tender Years.
Yeah. And that's what sparked this whole resurgency is that the album had been re-released by Satin Records there.
That's right, because Doc mentions it. He goes, man, I sold the rights to that, and they're making fucking all this money off of us, and yeah, I'm like, Doc, that was a dumb move right there. You should never have sold the rights to that album, man.
Yeah.
But the other part about it, though, is when he does go backstage after he gets done talking to Maggie. But I think there was the scene, though, before he talks to Maggie, he goes back to stage to talk to Sal. And that's a pivotal scene, too.
Yeah.
If you remember, he goes back. And, of course, Sal's very happy to see him. And, they're talking. And I like that part, which, again, gives you a little bit about Sal's character. Like when he's like, well, what'd you talk about? Hey.
Yeah.
Which is so what you would do, Bushy.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Me. I just love that scene. And then later he goes, it's Eddie they want. It's Eddie. That's all they care about is Eddie, which it's like, and then the part was like, because Sal is a very, very bitter man. You can tell he's bitter because I practically broke my fingers trying to play that stuff, which tells you right there, oh, they must have been doing some complex shit. Because you can tell by watching the movie, Sal looked like he was a pretty capable bass player. And if he's saying I about broke my fingers playing that stuff, that told me, even as a kid, I'm like, oh man, it must have been Season in Hell must be quite an album then, And he's just they could have gone down with Eddie as far as I'm concerned. Like, he's fucking bitter, man.
Yeah.
He is angry. Sal is a very, very angry man. And he's like, but Frank even tries to tell him, but Sal, you're on those tapes too. We're never going to get a dime from that word, man. I love the line he uses. Guys like us, man, they strike oil in your God, and all you do is end up with dead tomatoes.
Yeah.
And I loved that, man. I was just kind of like, really great line. And I did feel bad for him where he was just like, I'm mad at him for living and I'm mad at him for dying. Because it was like this thing. He loved Eddie like a brother, but I think he was a little jealous because as good as Sal was, as talented as Sal is, he's not as good as Eddie. And Eddie was obviously they called it Eddie and the Cruisers. There's a fucking reason why. Eddie was the leader of the band, and I definitely think, and also I think there was a bit of, as much as he loved Wordman, there was a bit of resentment. Like I said before, he was jealous of the relationship that Frank had with Eddie because they were very close.
Right.
And I think that, yeah, at that point in time, and then and I thought the dude who played Sal did a great job because you can literally see him crying. He's like, it just kills me when I think about how big we could have been.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, and that is kind of a hard pill to swallow. If you've been in that situation where you could have been like, there's been people that have been there, man, where they're this fucking close and it doesn't happen for whatever reason.
Now, from there, is that where he meets up with the chick?
Right. And then afterwards he meets up with the chick, and then or no, not the chick. You talking about Joanne?
Yeah.
Well, then you got the part, like I said, after that, he talks to Maggie and he talks about how, the whole words and music thing. After that, I think the next person he goes to see is Kenny, the drummer, if I remember right.
Yeah, on the pier.
They're walking at the airport, I believe.
Huh?
Are they like at an airport where they're walking together? It looks like
No,
it.
they're on the pier, like the
Okay,
boardwalk.
okay.
And Frankie, he's a blackjack dealer, at a casino, and they're talking about all the good times they had. And I like Kenny was a funny dude. He's all balling a chick in the back of the car, and he's talking about groupies and shit. And that's when Kenny kind of opens Frank's eyes up. Because as you know, Frank's totally reminiscing and he's talking about, oh man, those times they were great and all that. And I love how he goes, don't be playing with the memories, Frankie.
Right.
And he kind of tells him not everything was what it seemed to be. I think Frank was a little naive. And maybe because he was like, I get the feeling he was the youngest member of the group.
And the fact that he was a poet, so they're always romanticizing everything.
There you go. There you go.
Thanks,
Good
Teach.
point. Huh?
Thanks, Teach.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point though, dude. No, seriously, because that didn't even occur to me, and you're welcome, pupil. So anyway, I mean that whole scene I thought was really cool too, because especially when he's like, all right, okay, Frank, well, if you're gonna do that, you gotta look at you gotta look at everything. You can't just look, the fights, the arguments, the hassles, Doc and Eddie at each other's throats, nobody getting along, Eddie and Joanne fighting all the time, nobody talking to each other, Then he
Yeah.
goes, and then Wendell. And then, of course, that's when he brings up Wendell. He goes, man, you still don't know what happened. What are you talking about?
Uh,
What the
is
hell?
that
You got
where
your head in the cloud?
is that where we get the whole Wendell scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, what? What the hell, man? You got your head up in the cloud? Heart attack my ass, man. And that's when you find out what really, that's when he looks at Frank and goes, you got to grow up, Frank. Like, like you said, not everything's fucking, like you said, as a poet, people like that. They're very romantic and they tend to see things through, rose colored glasses, I guess, and that's when he's like, it's time you grew up, Frank. And that's when he tells Frank what really happened with Wendell,
Yeah.
which was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think,
For those that haven't seen it, we'll spoil that. He overdosed on heroin.
yeah. And you could tell, like, when he's knocking on the hotel, come on, Wendell, we gotta go, man, we gotta go. And he's fucking pissed, motherfucker, just, and then you see the paraphernalia on the table, and he's like, stupid motherfucker. He's like, so obviously Kenny knew about when, I don't know if anybody else in the band knew, but Kenny obviously knew what was going on and had gone, I think, for quite some time. Of course, he finds Wendell and he's gone, and then you go to the scene where you got a different sax player doing the intro to Tender Years. And Eddie's all choked up. He tries to sing it and he can't.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very moving scene,
It was, and it still showed, and that's how you can get wrapped up in this film. It's not a real band, okay?
It feels like it though, don't it?
Yeah, it does, because he walks off stage, he makes this speech about how I'm supposed to be up here, and entertaining you, and I just don't think I can do that, and
I'm
he,
sorry, but I don't think I can do that. And
yeah,
well, he talks about he felt that Wendell was the greatest saxophone player he'd ever met,
yeah.
ever, and
But the band plays on. The chick comes up. They do their work, man. Because
yeah, and it was a really
I like that part because
yeah.
there's been some lead singer diseases before,
yeah,
or lead guitarist disease, because there would be Deep Purple concerts where Richie Blackmore would just throw a tantrum and leave the stage, and John Lord and the guys would just improvise and do like a jazz session.
and that's what they should do. People paid their money. Somebody gets butt hurt. All right.
Or Jim Morrison would get wasted and throw a tantrum, and Ray Manzarek would take over on the vocals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I really.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this scene, because it obviously wasn't just some bullshit dudes hurting because.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's
buddies
the
are
difference between Eddie and the other guys as well. Eddie's fictional, but other than that, is that Eddie was doing it because they really probably should have just postponed the show. I mean, really, but back then, people have to, especially back then, but even now, you have a lot of pressure on you, man. There's people wanting to get paid. You got promoters, you got the fucking people who own the venue, man. They paid, and to say, well, hey, I'll make it up later, that don't always fucking fly, man. And so I give Eddie props. At least he tried, man, because to me, it wasn't like he wasn't having a diva moment. He was fucking heartbroken. His friend, his bandmate was dead. And I think that caused Eddie to go even down a darker path, you know. Um, After that event, uh, and of course the girl sings the song and everybody claps. And again, it's a very, and then you got Frank remembering, and then that's when he finally reaches out to Joanne and they have their reunion, and they're very happy to see each other, and he's even said, man, I've wanted to reach out to you so many times in the past, but for whatever reason he didn't. And that's when they start kind of putting their heads together about a season in hell and what's going on. And she said that I don't no, she didn't say her place was ransacked. She said somebody was calling her,
Yeah.
And they
pretending
played
to be
tender
Eddie.
years over the phone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
over and
and
over
then
and
he's
over.
like, "Well, somebody trashed my place, and they trashed Doc's place too." And she's like, "What's going on?" And it's got to be those tapes, A Season in Hell. And then that's when you go in the flashback of them in the studio, and Eddie's pacing back and forth, and they're playing the song "Season in Hell," and which I think is a banger of a song, by the
It's a
way.
great tune.
Good tune.
Fuck
Kind of
yeah, man.
reminds
And
me.
you can definitely tell it's different. Like I'm sitting there going, oh yeah, I could see why the
For
record
some
companies.
reason, it kind of reminds me. I don't know if I'm just crazy for saying this. It's like a toss between a Doors song and That Smell from Leonard Skinner.
Nice.
Okay,
That's
but the,
that's
the the thing about it though that you could tell, because for one you have it going backwards. It's like the tape, which nobody was doing that in 1964. I can assure you that didn't come till later with people like Jimi Hendrix, which was like 3 or 4 years later.
yeah.
I could see where a record company guy from the fictional Satin Records is like, what in the fuck is this shit? Plus the way the lead guitar is being played, it's darker. It's heavier. Like he's no saxophone because Wendell's not there anymore. So Eddie's just wailing on that guitar, man, and you can feel the emotion in the song. To modern music lovers like us, and I'm talking modern, even in '83, I was like, ooh, I like that. But I could definitely see why somebody in 1964 would be like, it's like Sal told Eddie, they want another On the Dark Side.
Yeah.
Why are we giving them this opera? I don't even know what you're doing. Like Sal didn't get it at all. He did not get what Eddie was trying, you know. So you hear the music in the background, and you can tell Eddie's in a sullen mood. And as you look, Doc's arguing with the owner, which, believe it or not, I think the guy who played the Satin Records guy was the producer of the movie, or he had something to do with the movie being made. And so they're playing it, and of course he turns it off, and they get in a big old fight. Eddie's just pissed. It's the only time I see Eddie really lose his shit, where he just wants to beat somebody's fucking ass, man.
Yeah, well,
Which again, typical musician. Don't fuck with the musician's music.
Hold
Yeah.
me back, guys. Hold me back.
Yeah,
shitting
he's got
all over
everybody
his
holding
heart.
him back. And he's like, I don't even know what to do with this. I'll tell you what to do with it, you son of a bitch. And of course, Doc's trying to smooth everything over. And hey, man, we can fix this. And there ain't no fixing this. You want to make a bunch of weird noises and fucking, go to Greenwich Village, be an artist. I
Yeah.
paid hard cash and I expect my money's worth, man. And and then of course then Doc gets mad at Eddie. We had the money in our hands and you blew it. And then Eddie shoves him, and there's this, and then
And
they're about to fucking
they
come to
just
blows. And
all
then,
get mad at Frank. Said none of this shit happened until you came around.
well, before that, Sal stops him and just says, "You're wrong, Eddie. You're wrong. I love you more than anybody else. I've known you longer than anybody else, and I love you, but you're wrong. They wanted another On the Dark Side. What are we giving them some damn opera for?" Which again, you got to remember, 1964. Nobody was doing rock operas. There was no Tommy. There was none
Right.
of that. There was not even a thing such as a thing as a concept album. So you got to look at, and I know it's fictional, but yeah, you can tell like, oh yeah, Eddie's kind of ahead of the curve here, man. Because I don't think A Season in Hell was a rock opera. It was definitely a concept record. No doubt about that.
Right.
And
And
so
it probably was inspired by the saxophone player's death.
yes. Also, you got to understand Eddie, like through the influence of Frank, I'm sure Frank and Eddie had conversations about Arthur Rimbaud.
I didn't mean to say like, oh, saxophone player. I meant to say Wendell. My bad.
No, you're cool, dude. We all knew who you was talking about, Travis. Yeah. And Wendell's awesome. Rest in peace, Wendell. So so you got the part where they're going back and forth and everything, but I have to imagine, at least off camera, that Frank obviously introduced Rambo to Eddie and told him about them all. And so I think by that point in time, Eddie is probably, inspired and maybe even influenced by Arthur Rambo himself. And so I think in some ways him and Frank were kind of on the same page of what they
No,
wanted to
picking my
do.
nose, Travis. The ball came off of my piercings, so I'm
He's
constantly.
picking his fucking nose, dude. Don't.
Oh.
No. Don't let him fool you, bro. So
There you go.
anywho,
Thick and bold.
so anyway, man, you got so Sal's just trying to tell him, and then he says, I just want to do something great. I want to do something no one's ever done before. And Sal says the one thing that just broke Eddie's heart. Why? We ain't great. We're just some guys from Jersey.
Yeah.
And if we can't be great, Sal, there's no point doing music ever again. And then he flips out. Joanne goes off with him. And here's another interesting thing about this, because there were sometimes I wondered if some of this was stuff with sets. That junkyard that actually does exist in real life. That is a true story. The story that Eddie talks about, this man thinking he could build a castle out of junk. All that is true. There really was a man who did build that, and it still exists to this day.
Nice.
I'd like to see it sometime.
I think it was cool looking, man.
It was cool looking, man. But you got Eddie, who's he ain't having none of that shit. He is pissed off. He is angry. Now he's bitter. All right. Sal eventually becomes bitter. Eddie's fucking bitter right fucking now, because he just feels like everything he's worked for is just going up in flames. With that, if the record company doesn't release the album, they're screwed. Nobody's ever going to hear what he's doing here. And I think that's why he just has his fucking meltdown when he talks about, he's like, here we are at last. You got your Edsels, your Neuges. He's doing this whole speech and this whole monument of nothing. And he just goes, here's to nothing, fellas. It's like Eddie's having a full blown meltdown, right in front of poor little Joanne. Joanne's trying to tell him the music's great. You're brilliant, Eddie, and doesn't matter. And I like the whole part where he's talking about when he says goodbye to her, and she's like, there were so many things I wanted to say, but me and Eddie, we made a deal. We promised we never talked about the future.
Yeah.
Because we always thought the present was perfect as it was, and we never really planned ahead, But she goes, but I knew when he drove off, there was not going to be any future. And, you see him driving off, and then you hear, and that's another thing. I really like the background music too, to that whole thing, which was also done by the Beaver Brown Band. It was really just really well done, because you're like, because at the time I'm thinking, well, did he kill himself? Didn't he? What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
And then that's when she tells Frank, I went the next day and I have the tapes. I hit him, and she hit him in the junkyard. Fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
So then they go to get him, and then you see a dude driving around at 57 Chevy following him.
Guy blue.
He got the leather coat. He's smoking, and the whole time, is this Eddie? What's going on here? And then, of course, after that, which this was an interesting thing, I thought. They get to her house, and there's all these photos on the wall, and it's pretty much of her and the band, all the guys in the band. But most of them are either her and Eddie or her and Frank. And then there was some that was her and Frank and Eddie. And she even says to one, that was always my favorite one, basically letting him know that, yeah, you meant a lot to me too, which was like, yeah, I think even Stevie Wonder could see that, but anyway, and then of course, that's when she kind of has her meltdown, because they call playing the Tender Years. And Frank's getting pissed. Who is this? God damn it. Yeah. They hang up. She starts crying. And then the phone rings. And then which was something that I guess Eddie used to do for her. I mean, Eddie was so cool. It's like, hey, you don't have to answer the phone. I'm going to call, and then I'm going to call back in a certain way, and you're going to know it's me. It was like this code they had.
Yeah. Same with
which is interesting, because I'd like to know how Doc knew about that. How did he know? You could kind of say that's one flaw with the storytelling. Like, how did he know what their code was? I mean, obviously, I guess Eddie must have told him somehow he figured it out. I don't know, man.
The headlights make a little more sense. I mean, you could watch them do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe he had been with, sometimes when he went to pick up Joanne, Doc was with him in the car, and that's what he did. But the phone was where I'm like, because she starts fucking freaking out. I gotta get ready. Eddie's coming. He's coming, and
Yeah.
Frank's just not buying this
But
shit.
it's like you
Frank,
feel a Twilight Zone twist coming on.
yeah, and Frank's just not buying this shit. Frank is not buying that Eddie is alive. He just ain't.
Yeah,
He's
see,
like,
I was with Frank. That's when I looked at Mindy and said, "Look, they're trying to make me think this motherfucker's alive. He's not, but who the fuck is it?" Because that's where they threw me off so well, is with what's his face demolishing his own place. You know, because you don't realize he demolished his own place until the very end in this scene. But the whole time, Doc, I'm like, who the hell is it? Because we've seen the entire band. None of them seems interested in this damn album at all. They don't give a damn if it gets released. Uh, Everyone's been affected. The only one who you kind of don't see affected that way is Kenny. You don't ever see his plays. Kenny, the drummer, you don't ever
yeah, we don't know. We
talk
don't
about.
know.
So I
Yeah.
was almost leaning towards is the drummer going to come up? What's going on here? So I was
I thought it would have been Sal
really? That's that.
because he's bitter that the band didn't get successful.
So did you think when he told Frank, as far as I'm concerned, they could have went down with Eddie? You know what I'm saying? You think that was him at the time throwing a red herring to Frank, like trying to take him off the, you know what I mean? Because remember, he told him, like, I could care less, if they're ever found or not, which ultimately we find out was true. But that would have been kind of an interesting twist if it had been Sal. Um, Yeah. I mean, I didn't know who it was. In fact, I didn't think it was Doc. I didn't know who the fuck it was.
No, I didn't think it was Doc at all because, like I said, it threw me off with the whole his house destroyed.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, man. 13-year-old Mike thought, "Oh fuck, man, it might be Eddie." I mean, as a kid, I'm thinking, "Holy shit, man," But I also, as I've gotten older, realized if Eddie were to come back, he wouldn't have done it like that.
No, he'd have just come back.
Yeah, yeah, he probably just knock on the door and go, "Hey, what's up, darling?
Yeah.
Hey, Joey, what's up?" Hope you're not mad at me, but so anyway, Frank's not buying this shit. She's getting ready. He decides to bail. And
Yeah.
at first I didn't know if he was going to leave or not because it looked like but then he looks and he sees that old farm or barn, so he decides I'm going to park my car there. I'm going to wait for this motherfucker.
Yeah.
And the car shows up, that really cool 57 Chevy, and he
Sky blue with the cream top. Oh, it's cool.
yeah, and he fucking does the whole fucking headlight thing. Hey, baby, what's shaking? And she comes out, Eddie. And then that's when Frank grabs him and pulls him out of the car and is about to punch him. And then he stops. And then that's when you realize who it is, man. And Joanne loses her shit, and rightfully so, because I like Doc. And part of that's because I love Joey Pants. But I'm going, bro, what the fuck, man? Like, I guess he had convinced himself that Joanne was not going to give him those tapes any other way.
Yeah.
And I think maybe, he even said, me, kid, I could never do anything the easy way. I'm like, no shit, dude. Like, think about the time he put into it. He had to find a car like Eddie's. He had to restore it. Okay. He had to do all that. Call her and fucking do all that shit. Tear his place up. Go to Frank's and tear his shit, which he probably thought Frank obviously he thought Frank possibly might have had the tapes.
Well, he was probably the main, well, he was a songwriter. He didn't do the music,
Right.
obviously, but he was the lyrics. He
did the lyrics. Yeah. Eddie did the music side of things and he did the lyrics, man. So with some of the music too, but Eddie would take it and then rearrange it and rockify it.
I really liked how, he kind of looked at Joanne. It's like, let him have the fucking tape. I mean,
right. And that's what I mean when he explains it, because Frank's like, why, Doc? Like, why? Like, why all this? And he just says, kid, I can never do anything. I figured Joanne had the taste, but I just didn't think she'd give them to me. And she's standing there looking at him, and he's just, they're going back and forth and whatnot, and he's telling him why he did it, and he's he basically even said, I'm really sorry, I never meant to hurt anybody, but I just. And she says, what would you do if you had the tapes, Doc? And oh, that's what he says. He goes, if I had the tapes for once in my rotten life, I would be made, you know. And then she goes, well, what would you do if you got the tapes? He goes, try me, you know. And she looks at Frank, and she gives him the tapes, and he just starts crying. He's like, I'm gonna do this for all of us, man. And it was really cool. He drives away, and Frank's like, go get him, Doc. And then you see Joanne, and they walk in the house. And like you said, Travis, I definitely think you're right, brother. They probably got together, I'm thinking, and lived happily ever after. Doc gets the tapes. Obviously, he releases them probably for a fucking pretty penny. Um, and and in my canon, I'm hoping that he made sure Sal and everybody got their share too, because he said, I'm going to do this for all of us.
Yeah.
And then the world gets to hear a season in hell, and you're watching this like documentary that Maggie's kind of done for him about the band and everything. And she's just talking about how ahead of time Eddie was, and that and that and I don't know, I just liked her whole speech, that Eddie kind of saw what was coming, not just with music, but with the times. Like the 60s was gonna, because if you look at the 1960s, the decade starts off way more innocent than what it becomes. But I've always noticed that about decades. Like it takes a few years into that decade before it really becomes what it becomes. Because sometimes the early years of that decade, you still got a bit of the previous decade hanging over.
Yeah.
Especially true of the early 60s. There's some 1950s, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there was some old doo-wop feel still happening.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I like that stuff, but I'm
Right.
just saying you could tell even the way people were dressing and everything, and then eventually the clothes people started wearing, the thing, and just things just by the end of the decade, music and fashion, everything's radically fucking different than when it started in 1960. And I think that her whole speech where she's like, a season in hell, Eddie saw the future coming, and I don't even know if we're, there yet. And it was a tour de force and all this. And I forget exactly how she says it, but she said, for many people, Eddie Wilson's music lives on, and so does he. And I just like how they go, and then they show all the pictures and the montage, and you got all these people in front of a store, a department store, which I don't even know if those things exist like they do now or did then, but they're watching, and everybody, they're watching it, and you're hearing the Season in Hell song play, and then it ends, and you hear the ending, and then the screen goes black, and in the reflection is Eddie with a long ass beard, smiling, happy and content because he finally was vindicated. Like people finally got to hear what he wanted to do, and he did. Like he might still be in obscurity, but he did it.
Yeah,
he's at peace. He's at peace. Yeah, he's finally at peace. And I love the way where he's even walking away, and he's got that Eddie walk, and he's twirling the keys like he always did throughout the whole movie. He does that a lot. And, I don't know, it was just really cool. And then it starts into the other song, which is also the because you had the Season in Hell, and then you have Fire Suite, and then it goes into that. Can you see the light? Can you hear the sound? Can you hear this whole world going around? And the whole credits. And I don't know, man. I just thought it was a great film. I loved it. I loved the soundtrack, and it was really cool. And like you said, by the time you get done, in your head it's a fictional group, but you almost believe that it is real, At least for me, especially the first time I saw it as a 13-year-old kid. I just absolutely loved it, man. And I know you do. Travis, what was your thoughts? What did you think of the film overall?
I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great film. I think it ended perfectly. And I didn't expect that ending. I expected some sort of clue about Eddie's, whether he's alive or dead, to show up somewhere in the end. But I'm happy it ended like that. And
I think it was a perfect ending. It was a perfect ending, man.
It's a great movie. It's a great feel-good movie, in my opinion.
Because like you said, when you see his reflection and you see, not only do you realize it's him, but you see that smile
Yeah.
of contentment, of relief, like finally, like, because you got to admit, he'd probably been living with that all these years. I think for him, it was like, well, fuck it. If I can't do music the way I want to do it, then there's no point in doing it, man.
Yeah.
And he did kind of commit suicide in a way. But it was a spiritual. It was a creative. He killed the creative side of himself,
Yeah.
the artist. You know,
No,
uh,
I can't sing enough praises for this movie. I don't understand folks that don't like it, but hey, everybody's different. Uh, I could draw parallels in the film from watching the Buddy Holly story, from watching La Bamba, and maybe having just watched La Bamba again after all these years and coming into Eddie and the Cruisers, it was that much better for me. But I just watched Buddy Holly story, well before the storm hit, because that's one I watch every couple of months. But everyone knows me, Buddy Holly. He would have been the king of rock and roll, had he not died. But it was just that believable a story. It's like you were watching a real band's documentary almost. I can't sing enough praises for it. I'm sad that I missed out on it on its first run.
hey, better late than never.
That's,
I always say that. Mark Alden Taylor's quoted me more than once with the whole. It doesn't matter when you get to the party, dude, as long as you get here, man. And you guys arrived, and I mean, I'm just ecstatic that you guys like the movie as much as I do because it's one of my favorite movies, man. And it's one of those things where you're right; it's almost like a docudrama, but yet it's not a real band. But I
yeah,
think part of that is because of the music. I cannot sing the praises enough of John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown Band. They are fucking great. They wrote some really, really great music. And even though I'm not a big fan of Eddie and the Cruisers too, the soundtrack is great.
soundtrack's good, but that movie's just not.
It shouldn't have bothered. They shouldn't have bothered, man. It was just like
It left
yeah,
that.
it was already the perfect ending. The way that movie ends, and that's why Travis don't even bother to watch part two.
Yeah, it's even
I think the
their
more time,
production value is just it's very
That's part of the problem,
80s.
dude.
It's
Did you
very
know why?
slick.
It was made in Canada. They didn't have the money. It's very bad production value. It just everything about it. It's just not a good movie, man.
Not great.
I gotta say, I think the more times I view Eddie and the Cruisers, I think it will break my top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Oh wow.
It really left an impression on me.
Oh man, I'm so glad you liked it that much because you
I
just seen it.
did. I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, that's how I was when I first watched it. I was like, "Holy shit, this is great. How did I miss this boat?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
great film.
I mean, I got to ask you though, Butch, did you and I have you and I ever talked about Eddie and the Cruisers before? I don't
No,
think we had. Because see, if you
No,
had told me you'd never seen it, I would have like scolded you. Said you need to watch that movie. But it's cool that your girlfriend has it. Tell your girlfriend she's got good taste. See what I did there?
yeah.
Anyway,
of course.
yeah, but I mean, hey man, she thinks I got a. What was it she said about my voice, Bushy?
I
That
don't know. She was drunk.
yeah, whatever, dude. You're the one that was always told you got a sexy voice. Your girlfriend thinks I got a sexy voice. That's good enough for me, man.
Yeah, well, she likes country music too. So
So I like some country music, not all. But anyway, yeah, great movie, man. I can see why it became the cult film that it is now because it's just really, really well done. And yeah, the soundtrack, man. I mean, John Cafferty and Beaver Brown Band, great stuff, man. And I think that's cool that they got the real life saxophonist to play Wendell.
yeah, that's pretty badass. Yeah,
Yeah.
can't sing enough praises. Before we get out of here, Travis, we always give somebody a chance to promote something, to plug something. What do you
Plug
do?
of the week.
Well, I don't have a YouTube channel yet. I'd like to start one soon, but can I recommend an album that I've been listening to a lot this week?
Absolutely.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Electric Light Orchestra. And one of my favorite albums in 1975 is Face the Music from Electric Light Orchestra. I'm going to recommend that. And even if you have heard the album, you probably heard the hits like Evil Woman and Strange Magic. But there's some other great stuff on there too, like Fire on High. It may not be heavy metal, but it has the spirit of heavy metal in it. You got Waterfall, the beautiful Waterfall, Knight Rider, You got Poker, which is a very heavy ELO song sung by Kelly Graucut. And it's just a really beautiful album with great catchy songs. So Electric Light Orchestra, Face the Music. Check it out.
Outstanding. I'm going to go with the obvious one. Go with the Eddie the Cruiser soundtrack, man.
Okay, now quick question. When did you get that? Or have you always had that?
I've had that for years, dude.
So you have the soundtrack, but you've never seen the movie.
Never
That's
saw the movie.
crazy.
And I only got the soundtrack because of Ian talking about it on Rock and Metal.
Ian's a fan of that movie too?
Yeah.
Well, dude, he was in a tribute band called Eddie and the Boozers.
Yeah.
He was the drummer.
That's news to me, man. Jeez.
Yeah, so Ian is a tribute version of Kenny, the drummer. Yeah. Or whoever the real drummer is of John Cafferty and the Beaver Brown.
Yeah. Well, that's cool to know, man.
Yeah.
But that's fine. Check out that soundtrack. What do you got, Mike?
All right, I got something, man. Last week, well, this week, I just saw King Diamond with Overkill and Night Demon. Fucking amazing, by the way.
Nice.
One of the greatest shows I ever saw, Bushy.
The mojo I put on you obviously didn't work. You made it there.
Dude, I'm fucking bulletproof. When are you going to learn? So anyway, but one of the bands I saw last week, because we went to see Hatebreed, they were celebrating their 30th anniversary with the tour, and they had Carcass with them. And
oh, isn't that Pete Steele's old band, or am I getting something
confused? Pete Steele's old band was
Carnivore,
which is a great band.
Which I love that too.
Yeah.
I love Carnivore. Carcass is more of a melodic death metal. One of the dudes that was in the band, are you familiar with Arch Enemy, Bush?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I like
Michael Arnott, the guitarist and one of the guitarists in Arch Enemy, used to be in Carcass.
Okay.
That'll give you an idea. The vocals are very I mean they're aggressive, but they're not like your typical death metal vocals. They're more like Gollum vocals almost, is how I describe it. Carcass has been around for a number of years. They had taken a hiatus at one point in time, but they were the other band or the co-headline. They were phenomenal. They were the main reasons why I went. Now there's a female thrash metal band, almost thrash metal, death metal band called Nervosa from Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Yeah.
They've had numerous lineups. Well, several of the members of that band left Nervosa because the lead guitarist for Nervosa is pretty much the primary songwriter of that band, and she got newer members. But Fernanda was one of the guys. She's the bass player and was the singer of Nervosa, has a new band called Crypta. And I saw him live, and she was sweet enough to sign the CD for me. There she is right there. Gorgeous, gorgeous woman.
Nice.
They were all gorgeous. I mean, they're beautiful, man. Look at it.
Oh, hell yeah.
Oh,
and,
my.
You want another look here?
Plus they're metal.
Yeah. And she was such a sweetheart because once I told her that I was a fan of her work with Nervosa, man, her eyes lit up. And it's like, yeah, sweet cheeks, I know who you are. And I am a fan. But this is their second album. It's called Shades of Sorrow. I highly recommend it, man. It's pretty heavy stuff, though. I mean, it's not. They're more death metal than they are thrash metal, but it's kind of funny because like Nervosa, because they play so fast. Well, so do these gals. So to me, it's like death and thrash combined.
Nice.
But just killer instrumentation. I mean, they got a great response. They were the opening band. And then there was another band, a hardcore metalcore band called Harm's Way.
Harm's Way.
And the lead singer, dude, this motherfucker was fucking huge, Bushy, man. Like he looked like let's just say nicest guy you'd ever want to meet. But man, dude, he had tattoos all over. Just look up Harm's Way and look up the vocalist, man. He's fucking like he's got the body of a superhero. Like fucking muscles on his fucking muscles, dude. The guy is scary looking. But the nicest guy you'd want to meet. Really, really. If you like Hatebreed and that kind of music, if you like hardcore, if you like metalcore or deathcore, and I know some metal fans are what I call elitist, fucking shit all over all of it. I'm not that way. I think it's like with any other subgenre of rock and metal. Some bands in those subgenres I dig and some bands I don't. But they're pretty cool. I like them. So I would check out. They've got quite a discography. Crypta has 2 albums. This is their latest one. If you want, bro, I'll send you their stuff.
Yeah, Crypta?
Yeah. Are you
Awesome.
familiar with them, Travis?
No, I'm not. But I'd love to check them out though.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I totally picked up. I threw like a curveball with that ELO.
Oh, it was great.
Oh, don't worry about it. We love rock and metal.
But
Not everything.
I do. There is a metal album I've been listening to a lot this week, also. If I can just say it real quick.
Absolutely.
Sure.
It's a classic album from the early '80s of the new wave of British heavy metal. Man, talking about Raven, Rock Till You Drop.
Nice.
With Hell Patrol, Hard Ride, Tyrant of the Airwaves. That was one of the first metal bands I got into when I was looking up, because Iron Maiden was my breakthrough when I first heard the debut album. I bought it at Best Buy, and then I went on YouTube looking for '80s metal bands in the vein of Iron Maiden, and I found Venom, I found early Def Leppard, I found Savage, I found Saxon, Angel Witch, and then I found Raven, and I was like, holy shit, this rules.
I saw Raven with Ralph and Ian in Nashville, man, and I saw a Madison Square Garden show in this itty bitty bar. It was fucking amazing. Those guys rock.
Raven. See, there's a band that should have been bigger.
Yeah,
right there,
I love me some Raven. I love John Gallagher's like very piss and vinegar voice.
I mean, bro, the very first podcast I ever did before Bushy was gracious and kind enough to ask me to be part of the plug was a podcast I did with, at the time, was a fellow DJ of mine when we were all at that metal station. His name was DJ Mac, or James McCormick, Irish guy, really, really cool dude. He had just started with a few episodes in. He had me on. I think the first episode we did together may have been Kiss Rock and Roll Over. And we hit it off so well that he was like, would you like to be my permanent co-host? And I was like, hell yeah. But the name of the podcast was called Mind Over Metal, which was from the Raven song. So we would, so we would, Raven, and that was kind of our way of, hey man, if Raven's out there, hey, we love you, kind of thing, And I really did enjoy doing Mind Over Metal with Mac. It was a lot of fun, man. Unfortunately, poor guy really does have the luck of the Irish. Right. Jesus Christ. And now he's like an EMT, and he just, the hours he works and stuff, he just can't really commit to that type of stuff anymore. He says once his kids are a bit older, he'll probably get back into it. And I was like, well, man, if you want to, let me know, man. We can make something happen at Cranium.
He seems like a cool guy. I'd love to.
Oh, I love Mac, man. For one reason why I love Mac is he hated Glenn Danzig as much as I do. So that was
And I gotta say, when you're talking about the All for One album, man, the song that really got me through some tough times when I got judged for loving metal music, because I was raised in a Christian household, and I would proudly say I love metal. People would call it satanic, all that bullshit. And I would always listen to "Break the Chains" from Raven. They're not going to take me away. We're going to break the chains. That was like a rallying cry for me, knowing that I don't care who stands up against me. I'm going to keep my metal flag going. Just like what Raven said, I'm going to break the chains.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's badass.
Right on, man. So, and is anything you can recommend any kind of music, dude? Because the plug, it's music and more and more. I mean, like, yeah, I do a metal show for Cranium, but that's one thing that's kind of cool about Cranium. Cranium's not a metal station. Anything goes. We have DJs there that play all kinds of different stuff, and what's cool about being on Cranium is every once in a while I'll throw a curveball. Now, usually when I do it, I'll have an intro where it's John Cleese laughing hysterically, and then he'll go, and now for something completely different. And then it'll go into whatever, it'll go into whatever track I'm playing, which could be ABBA or whatever the fuck, Bee Gees, whatever.
My main man, Samuel West, man, he posts those things right now for something completely different.
Right.
I love him when
one of the things that Sam did when he was a DJ at TMS and then even at Cranium for a while is he would do a what he called the Fuck It All block, which was where he would just play
FIA.
All kinds of crazy stuff, man. Or great. It was great stuff, but it was off the.
Man. He's one of my best buddies.
Oh yeah, Sam's great, man. We love Sam. He was going to try to be a part of this, man, but he couldn't make it, unfortunately. So Sam's awesome. I love that kid, man.
Yeah, maybe one day we could do like a 4 person chat, and it could be me and Sam. That would be awesome.
Sure.
We will definitely try to set something up, brother. We will definitely have
I,
you back on. This has been a blast, Travis. Thanks for coming on, brother.
I loved hanging out with you guys. I loved getting into this movie I've never heard of before, and now
I'm
I
just
have.
glad I was able to turn you on to it and Bushy. I
I
didn't know because if
I
I'd
can't
known,
get
I'd have been
enough of
like,
it.
dude, you know. And you know what? Like I said, kudos to your woman for having good enough taste to have the damn movie so you could watch it in the first fucking place. Because not all of us is as cool as Travis being able to get it the way he got it. Because I looked for it on I've got a Roku though, and I couldn't find it. I looked, man, I couldn't find anything, which kind of distresses me because that is a movie that deserves to be streamed.
Yeah, agreed.
You know,
Good one. Yeah, Travis, thanks so much for coming on. Glad
Hey,
you got
thank
to
you
enjoy it
guys.
the way I got to enjoy it because I just saw it the day that I called Metal Mike, you know,
right.
just a couple days ago when we set
And
this.
then he was like, dude, we ought to talk about that movie. And I was like, fucking let's, please. Cause, you know, and I think it'd be kind of cool, Bushy, if maybe we not always, but did a few more movie reviews from time to time, you know. I need to watch the one you sent me and we can maybe do something on that as well.
That's a good one. Death of a Rock Star.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely intrigued by it. It looks interesting, what I've seen of it. I'm like, oh, okay. Want to check this out. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's a good one. But hey, let's get out of here, man. I've got to walk around this building and I need to smoke.
All right.
right on, man. There is another really cool fictional rock group band that you might like that takes place in Ireland called The Commitments. Have you guys ever seen that movie?
No.
I've heard of it.
It's cool, man. You'd like it. I think you guys would like it. It's not like Eddie and the Cruisers. It's different, but it's a really cool movie. Anyway, guys, you guys rule. Travis, thanks for coming on, man. Oh, there is one
Anytime.
other thing I want to plug though. Black Joe Lewis and the Honey Bears. Get his whole discography. That guy is amazing. Saw him last Thursday at the legendary Duck Room, Blueberry Hill, the old stomping grounds of the legendary Chuck Berry. So make sure you check him out, man. He's amazing. Got to meet him. He signed my record. Really cool dude. And I'm going to try to set up an interview with him too,
Sweet.
as well as Fernanda. I got to reach out to her, man. She's going to let me interview her. So,
Sweet.
yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. Take care. Keep fighting the good fight and stay metal to your dying breath.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Travis. Bye, Vinyl. We'll see you next time.
All right, right on. See y'all later, guys.